To present this year's National Book Award in Poetry is Charles Simic, the panel's chair. Charles was recently designated as the 15th Poet Laureate of the United States. The first 14 haven't worked, Charles, so. He has published numerous collections of poetry, among them My Noiseless Entourage, Selected Poems, 1963 to 2003, for which he received the International Griffin Poetry Prize, The Voice at 3 a.m., Selected Late and New Poems, The World Doesn't End, Prose Poems, for which he received the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry, Selected Poems, 1963 to 1983, and Classic Ballroom Dances, which won the University of Chicago's Harriet Monroe Award and the Poetry Society of America's D. Castagnolo Award. His new book of poems, That Little Something, will be published in spring of 2008. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Charles Simic.
Good evening. I too want to begin by thanking my fellow panelists for their hard work and their perceptiveness and endurance, intelligence, smarts. Linda Beards, Vijay Sheshardi, David St. John, and Natasha Threataway. This is an amazing time in American poetry, as we found out reading all these books. A lot of good poems and good books are being written and published. At least 10 or even 15 more books could have been on our short list of finalists. The ones that we have here are Linda Gregerson's Magnetic North, Robert Haas's Time and Materials, David Kirby's The House on Boulevard Street, Stanley Plumley's Old Heart, and Ellen Bryant Voigt's Messenger. And the winner of the 2007 National Book Award for Poetry is Robert Haas.
Well, I've been saying to myself all week that I'm in such good company that I really don't care who wins, and now I'm not going to be able to find out if that's true or not. A poet who didn't win any awards because she never published a book had the best word on this. It's Emily Dickinson, and she said, "Success is counted sweetest by those who don't succeed. To contemplate a nectar requires sorest need." So I do want to say that it's the poets who are shared this nomination with me are writers I've been reading since I started writing poetry, except in the case of brilliant Linda Gregerson, who's a little younger than me. But David Kirby has been reinventing the narrative poem for years in a way that I've admired. I wrote about Ellen Voigt's poetry 20 years ago that she was conducting a fierce argument against fate, and that argument has grown fiercer and more sure over the years of my reading her. Stan Plumley and I are old comrades in this art, and his poems have always been rich and plangent, and this new book, someone described it tonight as a lyre-like meditation on mortality as if written by a poet as young and lush as Keats. Linda Gregerson is a poet of enormous elegance and intelligence who writes about completely ordinary things and has the special gift that Emily Dickinson and Elizabeth Bishop had of writing poems that are really smart about one subject but are much more powerful and disturbing about another subject that's completely implicit and fully realized. I've been learning from them for 20 years, so it's an honor, and I feel a little bit of roux that I'm up here and they're not. My mentor and dear friend Czesław Miłosz said a stanza of poetry has to bear more weight than 1,000 pages of discursive prose, and we've labored together at this task of trying to make poems that invent new shapes of feeling, that invent shapes for new perceptions, and that say something about what it's like to be alive during a given time. I'm terrifically honored to have this award, and it's a moment of convergence for me in a couple of ways. One is that when I was a sophomore in high school, my best friend was Joan Didion's cousin. And I confessed to him at a certain point that I wanted to be a writer. And he said, I have a cousin who wants to be a writer. She just graduated from Cal, and she's gone to New York, and she got a job with a magazine called Vogue. And I said, what does Vogue mean? And he, being resourceful, said, it's French for fog. Another convergence is that when I teach for a living, and when I had my first teaching job, I taught a large poetry course, and one of the students enrolled in my course, I should say, was Terry Gross. And many years later, she told me this fact, and I said, did it make any impression on you? And she said, not really. I think I'm quoting that accurately, and like everybody else in America, I've been admiring the impression I didn't make for 30 years. I want to thank my wife, a remarkable artist who it's been an enormous gift to make art beside and to love for the last 20 years. And to the team at Echo, Harper Collins, to Millicent Bennett and Michael McKenzie. Dan Halpern has been my editor for 30 years, and when I told him I couldn't deliver a second book of poems because it just didn't make any sense and couldn't be organized, he laid the poems out on the floor of his penthouse apartment on West 30th Street, which was a home to every writer and young writer in America in those years, and said, let's make an order. This goes first, this goes second, this goes third. I looked at what he was doing and went into his bathroom and threw up. And came back out, and it started to look like a book to me. And that's been more or less our relationship ever since. I think Dan must have edited as many Nobel Prize, Pulitzer Prize, and National Book Award winners as any editor in New York. He's been an enormous gift to me in my life and to American writing, and I'm very grateful for this. Finally, I want to say the first poetry reading I ever gave in this city was in Norman Mailer's house when I was 28 years old. He opened his house because of a book of poems that had been published by young writers. And I read, it was the most terrifying experience of my life, I think. I read there with another young 26-year-old poet, Louise Glick, who I think has also won a National Book Award. And when Norman died, I thought, a thing that no one said about him was how enormously generous he was to young writers. So to be here tonight in the company of my poets friends, my editor, my beloved wife, Joan Didion, Terry Gross, and the memory of Norman Mailer, it's a very wonderful moment. Thank you very much.